Hi, I'm Tally.
I'm Sarah.
I'm Lydia.
I'm Haley.
And this is our presentation.
This is our presentation, yeah. Okay, so our first slide here is talking about the NGSS standards. And so we chose the standard that is to make observations to determine the effects of sunlight on the Earth's surface. And we use this standard across all of our lessons because it really applied to the idea of heat transfer and how we could teach that to our students. And so heat transfer was our overall topic that we chose. And this topic is important to science because it happens all around us in the world. When you're in the car, when you're at the beach, when you're cooking, there's heat transfer happening all the time. And so this was a good topic that students could really relate to.
So then our next slide was about safety procedures. Our safety procedures included instruct students to be cautious when around the heat lamps, so they're not like running around, knocking them down, or possibly touching one that's been on for a long time and burning their finger or something. Instruct students to not eat the ice cubes. They are little Ricos, about like that big, so it could be tempting for some kids to put that in their mouth and eat it, but you don't want to do that because it could be a choking hazard. Instruct students to be careful when handling materials. For that, we kind of said such as like scissors, popsicle sticks, those kind of things, just so they're not like jabbing each other, cutting their fingers, just stuff like that. They're just being responsible with their materials. And then instruct students to ask for help when needed. So if they need help with something, we would much rather them come to us for help rather than trying to figure out themselves and then possibly hurting themselves. And then some forms of differentiation that we talked about for these safety procedures for students who possibly wouldn't know exactly what that says. We said visual aids, so we could have pictures, maybe some scissors with the X through it so that they know, be careful with their scissors, just some visual aids so that they kind of know what to do.
Okay. So our first lesson that we developed was about heat transfer because that was the main topic of our entire unit lesson. And so for this lesson, the students will be learning concepts of temperature and heat and how heat transfers to things. And so we figured that we would start out by going over the vocabulary, which 3 big words that are going to be present through all of our lessons are conduction, convention, and radiation. And so we will start out by giving examples of each of those, showing them pictures so that they have something to relate to, and explaining kind of how each of those processes work. And then as the students are understanding more about this topic, they'll be filling out a worksheet that has spots where they can put different examples of those 3 types of heat transfer, which are conduction, convection, and radiation. And this will be sort of our formative assessment for this first lesson. And we'll be able to connect it to real life because they can give examples such as a pot on a stove, or your feet in the sand on the beach, or heat touching the leather seats in your car from the sun rays. So there's lots of different examples they can give that connect to their real life scenarios. And once all of this has been covered, we will end with a discussion where we can kind of share some of our ideas and share our understanding of these vocabulary words. And then we're going to introduce the next lesson so that students kind of get a taste of the theme that will be continuing throughout this unit lesson.
Okay, so the next lesson the students will be working on is the effects of the sun on the surface of the earth. So for this lesson, we're going to have the students have 3 different cups, and they're all going to be filled with different earthly materials such as soil, rocks, and water. Then the students are going to be able to practice making hypotheses and predictions about what they think is going to happen to these materials once placed under the sun, or in our case, we're just going to be using heat lamps. We're going to leave the cups under there for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then students will be able to make observations about what happened to these materials when they were left under the heat lamps. In order to record the observations, and it'll also be our formative assessment, we're going to have students draw in on their cups the different materials and then write down different observations they saw, which one was the hottest, which one was the coldest, and in order to differentiate, certain students could just draw pictures instead of writing words, or just whatever helps them record their observations the best way possible. And this will ultimately help them determine the effects of the sun on different earthly objects, which will lead into our next lessons.
Okay, so our next lesson was the Save Rico Day 1. So first things first, we're going to draw the students in their attention by showing them a clip from Penguins of Madagascar. That way it's kind of fun for them, they'll be intrigued by it, and then it'll also kind of lead into what we're doing. So the class will discuss what they know about the effects of the sun, how it affects us daily, different seasons, what it feels like on our skin, stuff like that. Then the students will create a blueprint and a house, or just something that will kind of help Rico be blocked from the heat lamps. So they'll be doing blueprints of what they kind of want their house to look like. And then they will also build their house out of the materials that we will assign them on this day. Some groups will have popsicle sticks, some with cardboard, and then some with foil, aluminum foil. And that will be what they build their materials with, and they'll be handed these materials for this day. And then they will get little petri dishes. They'll put their penguins in the petri dish, and then they'll put it under the lamp for about 10 minutes. And then they'll be able to see during those 10 minutes, they'll cut out little penguins and have their sun, and that's what they will be recording their data. But that kind of comes into the next day. So for that first day, they're kind of just going to be working on their penguins and their cutouts for the art activity and recording their observations later. So once they're kind of in there and they're working on their activities, then they will talk about their observations and their recordings, and then they will remove the penguins from the petri dishes and under their buildings, and look at their observations, see which materials work best between the cardboard, aluminum foil, and the popsicle sticks. And then that way, with that information, it'll go into the next lesson based on those results.
So for Save Rico Day 2, we are going to do the same experiment as we did the day before, but we're going to have the students choose their own materials, because before they were required to use popsicle sticks, foil, or cardboard. Now they get to choose the best way to do it. And so first we're going to start out by reflecting on what they did the day before and ask them like what kind of materials they use that work the best, and hopefully they'll say cardboard. And then we'll let them choose 2 materials and work with those. And then they're going to create a blueprint on how they're going to make their houses. And then we'll one by one have them gather their materials, give them some time to work on that, and then they will build them, put them under the heat lamps again, see how they worked. And then when they record their observations on their little penguins and their suns, the first one is gonna have them predict what they think will happen while their penguins under the heat lamp. The second one is, was their prediction right? And then the third is what they could have done differently. And then that'll be like their form of formative assessment, seeing how they learned. And then for differentiation, some groups might need more time and more explanation through pictures if we need that. And then we'll all come together as a class and reflect on what we learned about the sun, and what we learned about how to save Rico, the best ways, what worked the best, and that's about it. These are our resources. The end. Thank you.
Hope you enjoy.
I'm not for ourselves.
Just watch it, not a